it away and start to talk a little bit more to the topic.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Raul and Olivia, and to the City of Westminster for having us here today. We are talking about the Cottage Foods Act. And just a little housekeeping thing before I get into this and introduce my co-presenter here. If you need the closed captioning on, you should have a little icon at the bottom of your screen that says CC. And I'm not going to turn on my closed captioning on my PowerPoint presentation because then that will overlap with the two of them. But if you do need that, that should be on your Zoom screen there. So thank you all so much for coming today. We are here with the North Metro Small Business Development Center, the City of Westminster. I'm from Polaris Law Group, and we're all here to talk about something really fun, which is the Cottage Foods Act. I am your illustrious speaker, Samantha Peaslee. I am an attorney in North Glen, Colorado. I work as general counsel for small to medium-sized businesses. So I don't work exclusively with folks doing Cottage Foods Act. I work with small businesses doing just about anything that they can think up there, along with the other folks in my office. I've been working with small businesses through the SBDC for 10 years. I've been a small business owner for 10 years. I also am the author of an online program designed to help small business owners who want a little bit more of a DIY approach. And I have with me today Mayor Nancy McNally, who is the mayor of Westminster for her third elected term, fourth total term, if I have that correctly. And she has been involved in the community as well as the CSU Extension Board for many years. She also has 3 children and a number of pugs, which I think is absolutely adorable. And Nancy is an 11-year small business owner in the City of Westminster. Largely, it looked like for embroidery designs, Nancy, but also she sells foods under the Cottage Foods Act. So she's here with me today, both in her role as part of the community, but also as one of you, as somebody who has been involved in the Cottage Foods Act. And Nancy was also very instrumental in lobbying at various points of time for parts of the Cottage Foods Act. Mayor McNally, is there anything else that you would like to add about yourself before we jump in?
I'm just grateful everybody's here, and anybody has questions as they go along after the fact. My phone number is very public, so don't hesitate to call and ask a question.
Awesome. And then we will also take questions as we're going along. I have to do one other piece of housekeeping, which is a legal disclaimer. Everything in here is for educational and informational purposes only. I cannot give you actual legal advice over a webinar. That is personal, involves a lot of facts, shouldn't be part of that public space here. That doesn't mean you can't ask questions, but it does mean that if your question is hyper specific focused, or I don't think that it is gives educational benefit to the rest of our participants today, I will very kindly and politely ask you to sign up for an SBDC consult with me instead, and ask that we take that question offline for either with myself or with Nancy. Not anything against anyone, just we want this to be educational for the entire group. This is going to be recorded, so do keep that in mind if you are going to be asking questions. If you would prefer for your question not to be recorded and shown for other people to be looking at in the future, we'll have that link, those email addresses to sign up with an SBDC consult at the end, or to reach out to myself or Nancy. So that's the boring stuff. Now the fun, oh, sorry, one more boring stuff. Forgot about this one. This is not, in fact, a food safety training course that satisfies the requirements of the Cottage Food Act. We'll be talking about what those requirements are later. So if you came to this class believing that this was going to satisfy those requirements, I apologize. That's not what we're doing here today. However, we've got a lot of other good, juicy information for you. We hope that you stick around on that one, and we will be telling you how to get to and find one of those food safety training courses. Okay, now the fun stuff. Let's talk about what we are all here for. What is the Cottage Foods Act. The Cottage Foods Act is a Colorado statute. I put the statute number in here for anyone who wants it. Everyone will have access to this PowerPoint as well as a couple of handouts after this presentation. So don't feel like you have to take notes. You're not going to be tested at the end of this. But what the Cottage Foods Act does is it allows small businesses and individuals who are making and selling a small number of limited but also safe foods, and we have some definitions of what safe foods are, to be able to enter into business more easily, because selling food of any kind is entering into business. Even if you're just selling it at a bake sale or selling it at a lemonade stand, you're still entering into business. So it allows our smaller businesses and people doing that with safe foods to do that without the same stringent requirements as the full food service industry. It's saying that we're going to relax some of those safety rules because what you are providing tends to be a little safer, and we want to support our small businesses and communities. It was originally designed specifically around agricultural sales of fresh products, so designed for farmers markets, designed for small farms and farmers to be able to go direct to the consumers who are eating their foods, which kind of cuts down that line of the places your veggies and fruits have to go first. It has developed a lot over time. And now the general purpose is to provide Colorado citizens better access to healthy foods, so long as they're safe and from known sources. So we are trying to create some known sources here on this webinar today by helping you understand how you become one of those safe and known sources. Nancy, do you have anything to add on that from the history purpose of the Cottage Foods Act?
You covered it all well. And I just know because I had a oops as I got started, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, that's not under the cottage food, but go over here. You can still do it at home. It's just a different place. So don't ever hesitate to ask. The experts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so we're assuming that you all who are here are either small businesses or individuals. And I think based on what we're seeing in the chat here, it's a fair assumption, a lot of small businesses and individuals. And we want to be able to connect you guys to these resources over time to understand, are you under the Cottage Foods Act? Are you under this other place? So this is supposed to help you kind of get along that path a little further. So some of the pros and cons of working under the Cottage Foods Act versus one of the other acts. So either the full restaurant and food safety kind of requirements or the agricultural acts, any of those things. Pros are it opens up your food sales opportunities. It's people who might not have had them otherwise. It allows for different or additional income streams. It means that if you're really enjoying baking that sourdough on the weekend, that you might have the ability to sell that out to people at doing something you already love for a little extra money. It allows for the sharing of family or traditional recipes. If you have that recipe that's been hiding in that back corner, only comes out for Thanksgiving, it kind of lets you share that out with the community. And it allows local individuals to support their neighbors and eat healthy and safe food things rather than things that are of questionable origin. But the downsides of the Cottage Foods Act versus the other ones, it does require some training. It requires some maintenance of records. We can't just have the lemonade stand without keeping track of what we're doing with that under the Cottage Foods Act. It can also lead to a lot of confusion. Some Cottage Foods Act vendors complain that they suffer because there are other people who are doing that unregulated lemonade stand next to them. And that people don't understand the difference, and that negative press around that other harms them. There is also the con that it is limited to certain foodstuffs. If you have a fantastic recipe for beef empanadas, that's not happening under the Cottage Foods Act, and we'll talk about those limitations there. So there are those limits. And then if you grow too big, you can't fall under the act anymore. And so that's a negative to that, is there's sometimes this gap that happens when you're a little bit bigger than the Cottage Foods Act, but not quite making enough for all the restrictions and regulations under some of the other acts. But as Nancy pointed out, if you feel like one of these cons applies to you, but the pros are still great, that's where the SBDC, City of Westminster, CSU Extension, and other resources like that can help you figure out how to address some of those cons. So we will be dealing with those cons. Do know that we know they are out there. This is not a perfect world utopia of an act, but we like to get those out right at the beginning here so that people get them. What we're going to go through now is the steps of how you start a cottage food business. So at each step, we'll kind of ask, I'll tell you a little bit about what you have to do. We'll ask Nancy how that worked for her, if she has any stories for us on some of those, and then we'll ask for any questions on those steps. Do note that we're going to kind of skim over a couple of the steps a little more than others. And insurance, we're going to skip completely today. You should obtain insurance. You should talk to people about obtaining insurance. But we've broken this down into these steps. First, to determine if your food that you're wanting to make qualifies under the Cottage Foods Act. Can you be here? If not, still stick around. You may learn some other good stuff. You may learn some things that might help you get your food under there. As Nancy said, sometimes there are some other good acts that you might fall within. Second, you got to start a business, or if you're a solopreneur and you don't want to start a business, you at least need to understand what those possible steps are and what you do need to do even as a solo. Third, you have to take a qualified food safety training course. Fourth, you have to determine where you're going to produce and therefore what steps you need to take about that location. Fifth, you're going to obtain insurance. We're not going to talk about that one today. Sixth, packaging and labeling. How do you actually put your foodstuffs out there? Seventh, selling, how to actually sell that. And then eighth, how to keep it going. So that's a lot of things today. If we don't get to all of them today, not the end of the world. You're going to have this PowerPoint as well as those handouts, but we're going to try and do our best. So jumping straight in. 3 rules of eligibility as to whether you fall under the Cottage Foods Act. 3 things that we're going to keep coming back to on whether you think this will work. Safety, size, and sales. Okay, so we're going to, when you have questions on, do I think that I am going to fall under the Cottage Food Act, we're going to look at your safety, the size of your business, and the number of sales that you have. So the first thing that we look at with that is safety. Does your food qualify to be sold under the Cottage Foods Act? There is a listing in the actual act, as well as in the handouts you're going to get, of the actual types of foods that are eligible and of the ones that are ineligible. General rule of thumb, as well as the actual act itself. The foods that are eligible do not require refrigeration in order to be safe to eat. They also don't require a highly specialized process to be safe to eat. So, for example, some more advanced forms of canning may require a specialized process to be safe to eat. And or if they're vegetables or fruits, they've gone through minimal post-harvest processing, limited to the sorts that are just kind of removing dirt, debris, dead leaves, not more intensive processing. Okay, so even if you don't have the list of eligible or ineligible foods in front of you, you could ask yourself, does it require refrigeration to be safe to eat? Does it require a specialized process to be safe to eat? Has it been through extensive processing? And if you can answer those questions, you'll probably be able to make a good guess as to whether your food qualifies. Talking a little bit about some of the highlights of those lists that you're going to see, particularly if they're either very general or might be a little bit confusing. If you have pickled foods, so long as the acidity meets the 4.6 or below level, that is eligible. So even though it has to go through some processes to be safe to eat, that's not considered significant processing to be safe to eat. If they're dried, dehydrated, freeze-dried, and plant-based, they're going to be okay. But look at the ineligible. Meat and fish products are not okay. So if it's a dried, dehydrated, freeze-dried meat product, you're not going to be able to sell it under the Cottage Foods Act. Okay. Preserves, jams, chutneys, honeys, syrups, and fruit butters are generally eligible. There are some exceptions to that. Notice that sauces, condiments, canned pickles are not eligible here. Additionally, certain jams and preserves like pepper jelly are not eligible. So if you're doing jams, preserves, chutneys, sorts of things, make sure to check that food list. Dry mixes, things that you can kind of like, you're just selling the cake mix and somebody else then puts the dairy products in it. Those are going to be okay. Baked goods are going to be okay, so long as there's no dairy-based fillings or toppings. Dairy-based is generally not going to be okay. You see that on that ineligible. Fruit fillings and toppings are okay. Note that a custard pie, like a sweet potato pie or a pumpkin pie, that's going to be considered dairy-based, versus a fresh apple pie is not dairy-based, and that one's okay. And then some flavored vinegars are all right. You'll notice that in ineligible, we kept saying dairy, 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 meat and fish products. Cut fresh produce is not okay. We just don't know. There's a lot of safety issues there. So if you are selling segments of oranges, that's not okay. If you're selling a whole orange, that is okay. Okay, so that's that distinction with some of those produces, and then the flavored oils and salsas. Nancy, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is that you make under the Cottage Foods Act?
I make peanut brittle. I started out with my dad's original recipe, and he was the only one in the family that made it, but it was the raw Spanish peanuts. And as I started, it was a friend that called in 2011 and said, "You can sell your peanut brittle now. We just passed this law." And I said, "Oh." So that Christmas I got started, and the kids had been bugging me forever, but now at least we had an avenue. And so they didn't have all the rules and regs at that point. So the first 3 or 4 years, things kept changing. And I do make my own labels. And so when you look at, and I can't see myself, so I don't know if you can see this, but on the label, you have to have your name, and so I call it Dad's Peanut Brittle. It's from Made and Created, has my email, has my phone number, has my home address, and has my website. When I did go to the agricultural group to get it from $5,000 per recipe to 10, they really understood what we have to do when we go out to the farmers markets or wherever we go. We have to buy a table. And so they unanimously, when we went through the state legislature and worked with some of our legislators nearby, they passed it. And then I think Governor Hickenlooper just had us down at the Capitol so he could get a round of peanut brittle, because I do it in bags broken up, but I do it in big rounds, because that's how you pour it out in like a round pizza pan. But then I saw some things like a quiche Christmas tree, and I thought, I wonder if I could pour it and make a Christmas tree. So I now have Christmas trees for sale. Then I found a gingerbread person's model, and that worked for doing that. So just think outside the box of whatever you're doing, and have fun. Finally, the kids said, "Well, have you ever thought of this nut? Have you?" So I'm up to 6 nuts, but it's funny because they all say, "Well, probably the peanut is our favorite because that was Grandpa's." I said, "Grandpa didn't make other nuts because he didn't even think about that. This was what he was taught, and he didn't think about macadamia and pecan and walnut and cashew and almond." And they go, "Oh, so it's okay to like others too?" I said, "Yes."
Oh, I love that. Well, and Nancy, does your brittle have dairy in it? So I'm going to use this to illustrate an important point.
No, it says, well, you
Okay.
have ingredients, peanuts, sugar, corn syrup, water and baking soda. You go from the whatever has the biggest amount to the smallest. And then you have this product was produced in a home kitchen that is not subject to state licensure or inspection. And that may also contain common food allergies such as tree nuts, peanuts, eggs, soy, wheat, milk, fish, and crustacean shellfish. This product is not intended for resale. So we often told them in the state legislature, if they required one more thing, I'd have to get it like an accordion folding for all of the things we had to have on here. And the only people that were at the state legislature to fight the bill to let us get $10,000 per recipe was the restaurants and the grocery stores. So I was ready for them. I took a very tiny bag with all of the proper labeling so that they would understand it. And they did, and most of them had their candy eaten before we finished the process. But I then reached into my bag and said, if I got sick on this jar of peanut butter, I wouldn't know what to do, who to call, who made it, and sort of blew the restaurant and the grocers away, and they passed it unanimously. So
That's great.
don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid. Well, if Nancy's peanut brittle had some dairy in it, if the dairy is incorporated, so it's baked into it for candies or for baked goods, it's not a problem. So if you're making like a brioche bread, that's not an issue here. It's if that brioche bread has a cream cheese filling. That you're going to have trouble with that, or if it's kind of a cheese Danish. But those candies are very much on the eligible foods list. If you also don't know, like Nancy said, just don't be afraid on that one. We have the contact email on this PowerPoint to reach out to the state. They have this special email that is dedicated, well, not dedicated, but incorporate where they want you to come ask questions about their eligible foods. So does anybody have any questions on eligible foods before we talk into setting up your business? If you do, over the course of the time, pop them in the chat. I'll come back to them at the end of the next section. So if you do have them and want to pop those in there. So the next thing you do to qualify under the Cottage Foods Act is to start your business. And you can always, we're not going to deep dive this on this one because the North Metro SBDC does tons of great presentations on starting your business and what business is right for you and how to do the bookkeeping. So today we're just doing some highlights here. The highlights are what the Cottage Food Act requires from your business. So the Cottage Food Act only will apply. Remember, we're talking about safe, size, and sales. So this is size. You have to be a small business that's defined as either a sole proprietor. So solo, I'm not going to file any sort of registration other than a trade name registration. That's it. Or a limited liability company that has 2 or fewer members. Under a limited liability company, that means owners. Pause here if you have done any of my other presentations. An LLC is a legal entity. You can be an LLC taxed as an S corporation, and that does not push you out of the Cottage Foods Act because they don't care about how you're being taxed. Those are 2 different things. So an LLC is a choose your own adventure as far as taxes go. You can be an LLC taxed as a sole proprietor, an LLC taxed as a partnership, or an LLC taxed as an S corporation. So long as you have 2 or fewer members or owners, they don't care. You can have an unlimited number of employees. So I think we saw a couple of established LLCs in here who might have a number of employees that are helping them out on things. That's great. Perfectly fine. Has to be registered in the state of Colorado. So even if you are a sole proprietor, you need to register with some sort of trade name to show, hey, I'm doing business in Colorado by selling these. All the members have to be residents. You then also have to be licensed with your local city or county, depending on what those rules are. So every city, county in Colorado is a little bit different. They don't all have the same rules there. Here we're working with the city of Westminster today. I've included the link for their home use permit and their sales tax permit. If you are not in the city of Westminster, you can always reach out to the SBDC and we can figure out what your particular license requirements are. The city licenses tend to be very affordable as far as those ones go. You will also need a sales tax license. You will need this with the state of Colorado, as well as with whatever jurisdiction you're selling in. Note that the jurisdiction you're selling in may vary. If you go to 5 farmers markets a week, and one's in Westminster, and one's in Denver, and one's in Longmont, and one's in Erie, I think that's only 4, and one's in Thornton, you're going to need to look at the local sales tax license for each of those for the event that you are there for. Please be sure to look into those when you are signing up for where you're selling those. If you're only selling it at your house, sales tax license is only the one that's at your house. So be aware that just because you're small doesn't mean you don't have the sales tax requirement here. You also will have some net revenue requirements. In order to qualify for the Cottage Sales Act, remember, safe size sales, and Nancy also mentioned this one, you have to be making less than $10,000 net revenue per product. Net revenue means what you got for the sale minus the cost of goods, meaning the cost of the ingredients that went into the sale, plus the standard cost of that. So it doesn't necessarily mean minus your cost of doing business on a large scale, but you can look at what those standard costs of the sale are. So when we're talking about net revenue per product, that means that if Nancy spends $200 on nuts, she can sell $10,200 worth of her product because that $200 is the cost of goods. Okay, but it has to be less than $10,000 to fall under Cottage Foods Act. If you start to go over $10,000, you're going to go into another act with different requirements. But for Nancy, she has 6 different nuts out there. That's 6 different products. So Nancy could potentially get a total of $59,994 in revenue and still fall under the Cottage Foods Act. Okay, so that's what we have as far as those size requirements. Any questions or Nancy, anything to add on the business requirements? Oh, you're muted.
There we go. It keeps saying tap it, and I was tapping it, but not the right tap. Sorry. You know, the getting registered with the state and figuring out the business license was probably, to me, what do you do? We live in Westminster's in 2 counties. So depending on where you have your, like Saturday, I have fair I'm going to go to from 9 to 11 in our downtown. Well, that's in Jeffco. So you just have to know where you're at and what the amount of tax is for that. But I really didn't know back in 2011 where I went for business license. And it's just call the city clerk. They will step you through. City of Westminster does not charge for theirs, but in some of the other cities that I've sold in, I think the highest I've paid is $20. And so just ask because it will help step you through.
Awesome. Thank you. And yes, they are very friendly and they will absolutely help as far as that goes. So we had a question on that one. What does net revenue mean? It's revenue from the sale minus the cost of goods and the standard cost of selling it. And that's from the statute. The standard costs on that front don't necessarily mean business costs, but they can mean things like the packaging costs. So that's one where you want to take a look at what do you have to spend to sell each individual unit, you can subtract that from your revenue of sale. So that licensing fee to get your sales tax would not be deducted from that for the net revenue per product. If that makes sense. Did that, or I hope that answered the question. And then if I sell 5 different kinds of bread, I can sell for, $50,000. Is it per year? It is per year, less than $10,000 per product per year. So if you sell 5 different kinds of bread, you can sell each one, you can sell $10,000 worth of each one. You can't really go into the like, well, I sold 15 of this and then 5 of this, and so it makes up for it. You do have to track what you do for each of those kinds of bread. But yes, you could make up to $50,000 that year with a $10,000 per bread. The standard cost, that refers to those additional costs that might not be considered cost of goods, but that are required for you to sell a unit. So the packaging, the labeling. I believe at one point there was a request for farmers markets fees to be in there. I don't think that qualified, but I would need to double check that on an individual basis. I'll tell you what, I will get an answer on that one and get that to Raul to send out to the group as a whole after this. So if everybody registered for that one, we'll check and see where they ended up on the farmers markets fees. I know that was requested at one point. Great. So those are your business requirements, standard business requirements for qualifying under the Act. Step 3 is that you have to take a qualified food safety training. Remember, safe. You have to learn how to do this safely. The good news is these are almost all online now. In fact, I think there's only in-person when requested on these ones. The main one that I'm putting in here is the one done by the CSU Extension. This is the one that Nancy knows and is associated with. It is online, about approximately 3.5 hours. You can reach out to them to say you are interested in person, kind of where your general area is, and they will let you know if they have sufficient people there for it. It is typically given in English or Spanish. Price last time I checked was $55.20, but if you are doing in person, that will change. And it is good for 3 years from the date of completion. Nancy, any other thing to add on the CSU Extension training?
You know, I remember the first time as I'm checking off all the lists and it came to, I needed that class. They didn't have any online at that time, and I had to drive way down. I'm in Westminster, had to drive way down to Southeast Arapahoe, I think, for that class. But when they put it online during COVID and everything, that was just a miracle. And I love it because of crazy schedules. But don't be afraid. They are so wonderful. When they say, pay attention to this, or they might say, this will be on the test, may be worded differently, but they want you to succeed. And so just really, really, really listen, and it's not scary.
Love it. It's not scary, and it's good information. We had somebody ask, is this the same as the Cottage Foods Act training? Yeah, the formal name is the Food Safety Training for Colorado Food Producers. It is sometimes casually referred to as the Cottage Food Act training. There are other ones available. I highlighted one more on this one because it's a common one and is the most multilingual one that I know of. So if English or Spanish does not work for you, or for some of the folks who work for you, this is the one that I tend to recommend. It's getting a food handler's card. There's a variety of providers. I put a couple of them in the links at the end of this presentation that you'll get. They're all online, tend to be fairly cheap per user. And also good for 3 years. So the nice thing about the CSU one is it's local, and you can get kind of that local flavor. But if you're needing a little bit more flexibility, if you're needing a slightly cheaper option, if you need some other languages in there, I recommend looking into the food handler's card. Next, you got to determine your location. You will learn so much about how to make your location clean and fit for that at that training. So I'm not going to reiterate the things that you're going to get in your required training. what I really want to go into is what kind of spaces can this even be? So it can be a home kitchen. Home kitchen, I think, is what a lot of us think of when we think of a Cottage Food Act. Nancy, you're in your home kitchen, right?
Right. Yes.
Absolutely. So very common to be in the home kitchen, no extra cost, no extra space. You could also be in a commercial kitchen,
Mhm.
one where you share space. You maybe rent time, you rent a table, you rent a fridge. Might be 7 or 8 other people do as well. Might be that you have it at a particular day. Lot of good reasons to have a commercial kitchen. If your home kitchen isn't going to meet the cleanliness and safety requirements, a commercial kitchen might be what you need to do there. It also may be good if you require some specialized equipment that your home kitchen doesn't have. Instead of buying that out, completely fitting out your home kitchen, looking into some commercial kitchen space. Private kitchens are also out there. Those are similar to a commercial kitchen sometimes, but it would also be what's considered, I think a couple of you had some delis, some cafes, some restaurants of your own. That would be considered a private kitchen for the purposes here. Only your business can use it, but it is a formal kitchen. Public kitchen are kind of coming into the zeitgeist a little bit. Those would be ones that anyone can come in and use, or ones that are a little bit more open to the public there. So any of these are permitted spaces under the Cottage Foods Act, so long as they meet those safety and cleanliness requirements on there. Your training will go over how to keep them clean and sanitary, but the key one that I have to tell people as far as what might disqualify your home kitchen is if you're going to be having your pets in the production area, you probably can't do it in your home kitchen. That doesn't qualify as the cleanliness and sanitation requirements. So if Fido has to stay outside, if you have an outside dog, that's going to be a different story. If you have some sort of restrictions that prevent your pets from being in that production area, you might be able to do it. But the big takeaway from that before you get your hopes up and get in there is that you're not going to be able to have the pets in the production area to qualify. Nancy, anything else you want to add on the space? Anything they
No,
should think about?
I was lucky enough, we were redoing our kitchen and really redoing it just for brittles. So I have a counter long enough, I can get 10 pans of brittle at any given time. So I can just keep going. And so I had some extra space. And so the the things I use just for the brittle are in their own cupboard.
That's fantastic. So you have them just separate from the other foods.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone was asking, are commercial and commissary kitchens the same? Commissary kitchens are often commercial kitchens. I've seen some that are public kitchens. They're just kind of more open, of people can kind of come in at any time and pay a small fee and use them for a period of time. Typically, for the purposes of the act, they should be considered about the same thing, as both are permitted spaces so long as clean and can otherwise follow the requirements. I also apparently missed a question from Dominique on going back to the training of, can you just keep renewing? You've had the food safety cards and Serve Safe. You can absolutely keep renewing, so long as the safety training that you've taken does qualify under the Cottage Foods Act. I believe Serve Safe on its own does not at the moment. However, they have before. So to the extent that that's merged with the food handler's card, that would be okay. If you have a certification and you're not sure if it qualifies, remember that email address that I put on the food eligibility. They will also take a look at your certification and see if it qualifies or not. But typically, once you've had it, so long as you renew before the expiration date or within the buffer period of time, you can just keep renewing after that. Great. Any additional questions on those points? All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about packaging and labeling. Nancy teased this one for us. She told us about the accordion book that you have to have on there. Under the Cottage Foods Act, all of the foods you sell must be packaged and labeled with the requirements. Means you can't just hand someone the bread. You can't sell unlabeled food to customers, so you can't do that open container beverage. can't do beverages anyway, but it all has to be labeled, has to be pre-packaged, can't package it at that point, and has to be food grade packaging material. Then it has to have the accordion folder of the labels on it. So I have this for everybody. You're going to get this. It's also in that handout. So again, you don't have to take notes specifically. The part in quotation marks is the part that the act requires to be on there, that Nancy was able to roll off the top of her head because she has had to put that on so many ones. So you'll get that there. Then you have that identification. Is this peanut brittle? Is this pecan brittle? Is this walnut brittle? The producer name, that would be your company's name. Full location of where it was produced. That might mean your house, if it's your home kitchen. That's different from your business address, possibly. If you don't want people to have your home address on their products, you need to look into that commercial kitchen, commissary kitchen, one of those other options, because you have to put the address where it was produced. Contact information, date it was produced, and the complete list of ingredients in descending order of weight. You don't have to give them the recipe, but you do have to put the complete list of ingredients in that descending order so they know what could be in it. Again, safe, 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 safe. Okay, so these are those label requirements. You guys will get those. And then you get the fun part. You get to sell stuff. Who doesn't like being able to sell stuff? So we're looking at the types of sales that are permitted. So we're going back to safe, size, sales. Okay. Sales permitted directly to an informed end consumer. What does that mean? Nancy can sell to me because I'm going to eat it. Or she can sell it to me to gift to somebody. That gifting still counts as an informed end consumer there. Nancy can't sell to, if Olivia had a small coffee shop, Nancy cannot sell her items to Olivia to put on the counter of the coffee shop and sell there. That is not a direct sale to an informed end consumer. You're not going to be under the Cottage Foods Act if that happens. You're under a different law. Okay, so that's the no resale. That also is the no intermediate salesperson. So Nancy can't be like, oh gosh, you know, Olivia, I'm pooped. I can't do this month. Can you go out to my places for me? And while you're selling your coffee, also sell my peanut brittle. She can't do that. What she could do is she could hire Olivia and teach Olivia about how this is made and what's involved in it and what the safety procedures are. And then Olivia could be Nancy's employee or agent. That's a designated representative. But then Nancy is directly responsible for anything that Olivia says as far as those go. So you want to do people you trust on that one. So that's how you get that designated representative there. You can loop people in, but they have to be educated. You are responsible for them. They can't be an intermediate salesperson. You can be online so long as all sales go to people in the state of Colorado. Now, you are not responsible. If I go and I bring Nancy's wonderful peanut brittle to my grandma in Maine when I go out there to visit her, Nancy's not responsible for that. She still sold it directly to me as an end consumer. I was in the state of Colorado. That's not her problem that I wanted to gift it to somebody out there. However, if Nancy knows that I'm going to go sell a bunch of them out in Maine because I told her, because I bought more than any reasonable person could eat, that does become her problem. You can't ostrich your head. And then you have to have that disclaimer at the point of sale. I put it in quotation marks, so you know you have to have exactly that, bold and underlined. And then best practice is to have a copy of your certificate. I am a valid seller under the Cottage Foods Act. Ask me what that means. Or have a QR code that goes back to your website and have a description of what it means to be in the Cottage Foods Act. So that then when the person selling caramels next to you doesn't have that, you can talk about it without bad-mouthing your neighbor necessarily. Like, this is important. You should ask everybody who's here if they're a seller under the Cottage Foods Act. or what their registration is. Nancy, anything to add on that one?
You know, I ended up doing some really short videos how the nuts came, and because I have to buy those from whoever happens to have the kind of nuts I need. But then how you record that, how many pounds, and then as you're working on the different batches, you just keep record of it. So if somebody did get sick, and in all of these years nobody has, but you still want your records to keep you safe from what you're selling. And so I did do some recordings that I have on my phone that if people want to know about it, I can show them the kitchen, I can show them the cupboards, that just the pans for brittle are saved, all of that kind of thing. In all of the years that I have sold, I've never been asked to see one of my videos, but I keep them just in case there's going to be one somewhere down the line. The other thing, when you're doing the farmers markets, or like we have Westy Fest coming, that is a huge thing that gets 30 to 40,000 people. And if I were to have a table, I'm not going to, but sometimes just beware and ask, do you have requirements for packaging? Because I was at one of our Westy Fests as mayor, and not being part of the of the sales for that one, people came up to me and said, well, everything has to be biodegradable or they're going to shut you down. And so just beware. And as was talked about, make sure your bags that or whatever you're using to sell out of are food friendly. So sometimes being food friendly and the bio stuff, you have to search a little bit. So just know what the rules are for those farmers markets or wherever you're going to set up a table, so that they don't close you down quicker than you got set up.
And that's why we have those standard costs in there. That's absolutely right. Check where you're selling and what their requirements are. And if those don't fit with the Cottage Foods Act, you can tell them that's a requirement that violates the Cottage Foods Act. Most of them go above and beyond. They're not actually asking you to do anything that's going to break that rule in there. I just because Nancy was talking about the marketing, I switched it over to how to market yourself and how to use the fact that you're a cottage foods vendor in your marketing. But I did also want to answer one of the questions we got in, which is, can you sell cookies on Etsy? Selling on Etsy is not a problem, but it's risky. So what you would have to do to sell on Etsy or an online store that you don't control is you have to put, we will only deliver to people in Colorado. So wherever that delivery address is, you're going to have to limit it to, it shuts down sales outside of the state of Colorado. They could purchase it with a credit card that comes from outside of the state of Colorado, because sometimes people are getting them as gifts, or we've got a lot of transplants here. But you have to say, I can't deliver to anyone outside of the state of Colorado. Etsy used to, I haven't checked recently being like last 18 months or so, Etsy used to have a back end delivery limitation. So you actually could put in where you would deliver things to and from. If they don't currently have that, you still need to do the banner and you may have to cancel some sales. So nice thing about things like that is they tend to take care of the sales tax stuff for you a little bit better. Downside is you have to do a little bit more micromanaging on what you can actually do under the Cottage Foods Act. But those are great ways to market yourself. You know, in Colorado, saying that you have something under the Cottage Foods Act means something to people. They know about this, they care about this, a lot of them want to support it by being open and turning this into a marketing thing instead of just these are boxes that I have to check or I'm going to get shut down or fined. You can really distinguish yourself out there. I love that Nancy mentioned the videos. Behind the scenes videos have a really strong impact. That's a really great way to market it. Make sure that you're not posting that you're doing something under the Cottage Foods Act. If you're behind the scenes videos, shows that you're actually doing a safety violation on that kind of thing. That could be an issue there. But otherwise, if you're otherwise following everything in here, it should work. You could also collaborate with other limited small businesses. I think Nancy talked about some yard sales during COVID, where she and a bunch of other cottage food bakers would just kind of set up tables in the cul-de-sac, and each was selling their own things. That's a great thing. And you could limit that to Cottage Food Act participants only. It's the holidays coming up. Great time to sell cottage food products, especially those dry mixes. Fantastic. Great to put in gifts with other people. Great to co-promote, especially if you are selling this great bread and you have a friend who has these preserves that they're selling under the Cottage Foods Act. Fantastic to co-promote with people. Co-promotion would be different from that indirect selling. Go ahead. Oh, I thought Nancy said something. You could even put a sign up. You could even just put a sign up in your yard and say fresh peanut brittle today. First come, first serve. That would also be, I saw the question about Facebook Marketplace. Absolutely. Put it up on Facebook Marketplace. Notify your neighbors that you plan to have your next batch ready on Friday. They could ask you to reserve some for them ahead of time, but then it's first come, first serve. First people to knock on your door. That's a great way to promote what you're doing. So absolutely use this as part of that marketing. I'm just going to really quickly try to get through the other couple of slides because I see we've only got a few minutes left. I want to respect everyone's time on this one. But we're really at the end. So after that, you just have to maintain your records over time. Nancy talked about making sure that your batch records of what you've actually done, those production records, are there. That is a requirement. It may be that nobody ever asks you for them. But if they do and you don't have them, it's a real problem. So do make sure you have those. Your business records are ones that the SBDC can talk to you about. If you have an LLC, you want to make sure you're maintaining those business records. Otherwise, you may not actually be an LLC. You may just be a sole proprietor, which means there may be some liability issues. The production records, financial records, particularly if you get audited about whether you've actually kept within the limits for net revenue there. You also want to make sure you're keeping your sales tax records because that could be a big problem if you're audited and you haven't paid those. If you end up having people helping you, particularly employees, you want to make sure you have written internal processes and procedures to make sure this is done correctly every time. And then you also want to maintain your training records that you've done those food training requirements on a regular basis. So ideally, you get a nice little accordion folder, or if you're a digital person like me, you get a nice little Google Drive file and you keep these all in one place. You can even create just 5 little tabs on there: business, production, financial, internal, training. Keep them all. Make sure that you look at them at least once a year. If you have issues or questions about record keeping, great for an SBDC consult on kind of what the best practices are for those sorts of things. Operational benefits, we just kind of talked about the pros and cons on here, but you could see from what we've done, this is generally a lower cost thing, which reduces barrier to entry. I have popped in a link there if you want some additional funding and resources that are open to Cottage Foods. The links that are on there, they do not always have it available. Sometimes it's time limited. Sometimes it's first come, first serve. Sometimes it's dependent on where their other funding comes from. But I did put the link in there if anyone needs funding to help get started. Last but not least, the scary part, if you're not compliant, which Nancy said nobody's ever checked this for her, but if you're not compliant, if you are misbranded, if somebody comes up and it says that you have caramels, but it says that they're nut brittle, you're non-compliant. If it doesn't have all of those packaging requirements on there, you're going to be non-compliant. This may trigger a non-compliance issue. If a consumer complaint is received from the health department, it may trigger an investigation. If your product is suspected in an injury or a foodborne illness outbreak, injury is a very broad category. Mostly it's foodborne illness outbreaks. But if somebody chokes on one of your products, if there's a bone in there that isn't supposed to be in there, because why would there be a bone in grandma's sourdough? As far as that goes, that will trigger compliance. You shouldn't plan on, just because you do everything right, you will never be investigated. Anyone can sue anyone at any time for any reason. How likely it is that it happened determines how quickly it gets resolved, not whether or not they can do it in the first place. So you should always assume that you should always practice as if you may be investigated. Okay, otherwise you're taking a risk. And the consequences of that risk are you might have to go through a food sampling and inspection. You have to submit certain batches of your products for a certain period of time. They may come in and investigate your kitchen. Your product may be embargoed and condemned, AKA they show up at the farmer's market, they take your entire stock. They take everything out of your kitchen. And then they're going to hang on to it for testing, and you have to pay the storage fees as your dough sadly sits in a locker. It's also a criminal misdemeanor potentially. So if you were misbranding and it was intentional, it may be a criminal misdemeanor. Not worth getting a misdemeanor on your record. So make sure that you're doing that. You can't just be like, oh, well, I ran out of room on the product. I guess I'm just going to leave out these two requirements. No, criminal misdemeanor. Don't mess with it. Okay, get the accordion label. If you are found that you're actually should be under a different act, meaning operating a full out food establishment, you're going to be determined to be operating that without a license. You will get enjoined, which means you have to stop all operations. You may be assessed back fees for all of that time you should have been under a different license requirement. You may have to do additional fines. It can get very, very, very expensive. It's way cheaper to just do it right the first time. Right, Nancy? It's not that expensive to do it right?
Right.
There we go. It's not that expensive to do it right. It's very expensive if you're found out doing it wrong. So I like to say if you did it right the first time, it might take you about $400. If you do it wrong and you have to get me involved, you're looking at anywhere between $4,000 and $40,000. Don't need to come see me after. See me or somebody else like that before. I put in some sites and additional resources. I do have the questions tab. I can stick around for 5 minutes, but I know we're out of time. And so I want to be respectful of that for everyone. Please feel free to reach out to any or all of us who are here. Get your free consult. Ask Nancy for some amazing brittle and when she's next going to be selling it or where she's going to be selling it so you can get some and get addicted like the rest of us. If you have any questions, do feel free to Raul, if you're okay to stick around for about 5 minutes if people have outstanding questions.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so thank you again, Samantha. That was amazing. Thank you, Mayor McNally, and for sharing your experience and your expertise. And yeah, I second that. We all got to try your brittle. Christmas is coming up, right? So
That's right.
And there's plenty of resources, y'all. We're going to be sending out the slides, the recording, and some more links and whatnot. So I'm just going to drop one thing here in the chat. If you do want free or no cost one-on-one advising with the Colorado SBDC, that's what this is here for. If you're already a client, there's a process for that. If you're not, there's a process for that. Just bear with us in this. We have a small transition going on in terms of our platform. So there's a little bit of hiccups going on with that. We're working on cleaning those up. But if you get any challenges with that, we're here to support you through that and make sure you get logged in properly and get where you need to be with that. So if there's no more questions right now, any questions about the Cottage Foods Act as to Samantha or to Mayor McNally, or for us here at the SBDC, or for City of Westminster? Any questions?
If anybody has follow-up ones that you don't want to ask right now, I will get that answer for the one that I did not know the answer to off the top of my head out to everybody within a week, or to Raul, and he'll get it out to everybody within a week. So if you have one that you're shy about asking right at this moment and you want to pop that over to us, we will also get that out to the general group.
Yes,
And
yes,
CSU does have a cottage food page for those of us that are in cottage foods. And it's wonderful because, like, if somebody is ending up moving and they're having to get rid of things, or if they just have questions of what icing can go on cinnamon rolls that is stable, every question in the world can be asked there and somebody will give an answer. They have Mary Snow from Jeffco, and they have a person from Arapahoe, and Xander, who used to be, she's in Boulder and used to run the program. She'll jump in and answer. So there's experts out there to help us, and don't be afraid. But you do have to be a cottage food person to sign up for that Facebook page.
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you, Nancy. And also, I did forget Shelby Wood, our small business navigator for the city of Westminster, is on here. You can also send her any questions that you have. Stephen, that question that you currently have about stands, where to set up in the city, that is the perfect question for Shelby and your city resources, wherever you happen to have those. That's going to be city by city. So great one to reach out to them and ask. Is there any form of cottage food law you can look at for meat and USDA certified animals? You know, off the top of my head, Lisa, I don't think that there is, other than the resources generally available to small businesses. However, I would reach out to the CSU extension people because they are very involved in trying to help promote agricultural resources being sold to people. And so if there are any specialized resources, they will know. So I don't have an answer off the top of my head to you other than look at our resources here for that CSU extension contact and see if they can help you out with that. Perfect.
And then sort of an extension of Stephen's question, if you are in a city that isn't the city of Westminster, you're not looking to sell there specifically, just reach out to me and let me know what city you're in or looking to sell out of, and we will try our best to connect you with the appropriate city people there to make sure that you get those answers. Any other questions? All right, looks like there's no more questions. And if any other questions pop up, just reach out. I will be sending out a follow-up email so you can just reply to that. Can I request advising for starting to sell snacks? Yeah, any business questions, advising is going to be one of your best resources, your go-to thing. It's sort of the crux of all of this network across the state, that if you get to us, you get to advising, that lead advisor for you is going to be able to start to connect the dots for you across all of your business needs and questions. So that's the best place to go to start. And then from there, we'll help you out with that.
And I'd
All
like
right.
to just
Thank you all.
add
Yeah, go ahead.
quickly into the end here, if you guys don't mind, also on our website. So Raul was talking about the fact that we have the advising, which is awesome. We were also expanding access through our trainings page, where you found this webinar to sign up. That isn't just going to show North Metro trainings. It's going to show all trainings. So Larimer County, there's lots of different SBDCs that are offering different types of trainings. And so just definitely check on there from time to time and see what's available. A lot of these are virtual and it's free. Most of them are free. So thank you all for joining.
Thank you guys. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye. Thank you.